Hey guys, what's up? LD Shadow Lady here, and this is 100 Days of Minecraft. I've seen quite a few people try this idea that was started by Luke the Notable to start a fresh Minecraft world on day 1 and keep track of your progress all the way up till day 100. However, unlike Luke, I'm not going to be playing it on hardcore because I wouldn't last a day. Now, let's get started. So day 1, the first thing I did was get myself a set of stone tools, and I went off in search of a good cave. It didn't take long before I got distracted by some horses, but then I spotted the perfect cave in the distance, so I ran my little legs over there to go and collect as much iron as I could find before the sun went down. With my modest haul of 15 blocks, I decided to head back to my spawn point where I would set up camp. It's too cute here and I never want to leave. I made myself a bed and I dyed it red for old time's sake. I made myself a super unnecessary campfire just for the vibes, and that was the end of day 1. Day 2, I decided to start building a house, and since we're in vanilla Minecraft, I thought I would go for a cute cottagecore vibe. But I only got this far before the sun went down, and that was the end of day 2. So day 3, I decided to get a roof on this baby, so I ventured out to a nearby dark oak forest to collect some of those gorgeous chocolate planks. At this point, my husband Joel entered my room and suggested the idea of having McDonald's for dinner. I agreed that this was a sound plan. Can I have nuggies? With over a stack of the dark oak logs, I headed back home to work on my roof. Of course I didn't finish it because it's a roof, and they take me far longer to build than they should. Day 4, I spent the entire day finishing the roof. On day 5, I put the finishing touches on the exterior of the house, and I started building a second floor. Unfortunately, progress was a little slow today on account of me pigging out on my McDonald's. On day 6, I finished the basic interior, so now it's ready for all my decorations and collections. And I go to sleep in my basic red bed for the last time because I decided then and there that tomorrow I'm making a bunk bed. And on the 7th day, Lizzie said, "Let there be bunk beds." I spent a good part of this day deciding what colour bunk beds to get and finding the wool, and then I stumbled across a bee! And it was so adorable I just had to lure it home with me so he could sample my flowers. I turned away for 5 seconds to make myself a bunk bed, and when I came back, the bee was gone. But the impact he made on my life will last forever, because he inspired me to create a cottage garden. So I got it started by placing these leafy growths all over my walls and my roof. And what do you know? That was the end of day 7. On day 8, I continued fulfilling my cottagecore dreams and fenced off a little cottage garden. I made a cute little path up to the door. Then I randomly realized that I had no armor on, and I had done nothing intelligent with those 15 iron ingots from day 1. So I made a chest and a hat, and I continued happily filling my cottage garden with flowers. So here's my progress by the 8th day. On day 9, I had only one thing on my mind: bees. So after a quick Google search, I knew everything I needed to know, and I set off in search of a bee nest. Heading south from my house, I finally found one, but of course it was empty. So I coaxed him back to his hive, and I left a few floral offerings. While I was waiting for him to do his thing, I thought I would check out the nearby jungle, so I grabbed a few vines for my cottage garden. Still no honey. So then I did a little coal mining nearby, until there was no coal left. And still no honey. Then I collected some sand, because you can never have too much sand. And still no honey. Then I encountered a witch, who seemed hellbent on thwarting my plans that day. She poisoned me for 40 seconds, and I nearly died. But the good news is there was honey now, so I smoked out the hive so as not to cause distress to the bee while I harvested the honeycomb. 3 is all I needed to make a hive of my own, so I excitedly ran home in the complete darkness. And that, my friends, was day 9. On day 10, I crafted my beehive, and I found a couple of bees to bring home. I gave them some flowers, and I was shook when a baby popped out. But now I have a cute little bee family living in my beehive. So then I ate my last piece of food, and I realized I should probably start a farm. I thought this hilltop location beside my house would be quite nice, but to start a farm up there I would need a bucket. I popped down into the caves just below my house to grab some iron, and I encountered my very first death. Upon respawning, I enacted immediate revenge, and I got that iron I came for. As night fell, I crafted the bucket I wanted, but day 10 will go down in history as a cursed day. Day 11, I started working on my farm, but I realized I was going to need a lot of wheat seeds, and I thought it would be clever to just find a nearby village and borrow some of theirs. So I set off in a westerly direction, looking for villages, and I found one just in time for the end of the day. I slept through the night and woke up on day 12, refreshed and ready to steal. First I stole their village bell, then I stole their cats. I took the hay bales, I took the bookshelves, I took a nap, and on day 13, I took my leave. So now I have 2 cats, a doorbell, enough seeds to get my wheat field started up here, and a few of these vegetables, which I decided to plant over here in a little vegetable garden. Oh, and just before going to sleep, I thought it would be a good idea to try and harvest my beehive. It was a terrible idea, and one of my bees died. So day 13, unlucky for some, especially that bee. So day 14 begins and I decide to work on my vegetable garden. Being such a completionist means that I want to have one of every single vegetable, so I expanded my farm a little, planted some pumpkins, and I realized I need to go find some melon seeds and some beetroot seeds. I ran off to the nearby jungle and I found melon seeds easily enough. I checked the village from the day before and nobody had even heard of beetroot. So I went off into the sunrise of day 15 in search of another village, a better village. I found a tiger village just before nightfall, so I kicked this man out of his bed and stole it for the night. So day 16 begins, and I start looking around only to realize these people don't know what beetroots are either. They do, however, have these delicious sweet berries, which I will steal for my cottage garden. So I run off once again in search of another village, looking for beetroot. Eventually I found this plains village and I started harassing the villagers, but they wouldn't give up the goods. It was at this point that I realized that somehow I had picked up beetroot seeds on my adventures already, and they were in fact sitting in my inventory. And then I realized I had no idea where I was anymore, and I was very, very far away from home. My only option was to run towards 0-0 and hope that was where I spawned. After a while, I stumbled into this flower forest and it was magical. The flowers just went on, and I was so happy. And then the sun went down, and I was so scared. But eventually I saw the glow of my cottage through the foliage, and I was home again. So a 3-day adventure for beetroot seeds, and it turns out I actually acquired them on day 1 without realizing. On day 17, the first thing I did is plant my precious beetroot seeds, and then I planted the sweet berries in rows beside my vegetable garden in the hopes that it will look really cute when it's all grown in. So while I waited for everything to grow, I moved inside to do some decorating. I started with some bookshelves up in my bedroom, and then I thought it would be a good idea to make a fireplace. And I want it to be fancy, so of course I'm using brick, and it took forever. In fact, I spent the whole day making this fireplace, and I stayed up almost all night finishing it. But the result is adorable. On day 18, I decided to go mining, because despite living in this world for so long already, I still don't have a diamond. So I found a nice looking cave, and it was a dead end. So then I staircased down until I found something. Eventually, I found this really cool underground lava lake, and I decided this would be a perfectly safe place to sleep. So we roll over to day 19, and it's time to mine. I found 2 veins of diamonds, giving me a total of 11, and I found a couple of stacks of iron. So at the end of the day, I went back up to the surface and headed back home. So on day 20, it's time to start using all those diamonds we collected, and I have a little tradition to frame my first diamond. So I made an item frame and I displayed it up on the wall. Then I made myself an enchanting table so I could make my first diamond pickaxe and get my first ever enchantment. Then I realized my wheat field has grown, so I can start taming some farm animals. First I wanted a chicken, so I found this one drowning in a hole, and I rescued him, and now he lives in my garden. And that's the end of day 20. On day 21, I found a nice area just beyond the wheat field, and I decided to build a pig pen. But it started getting dark and I still hadn't finished yet. So on day 22, I finished the pig pen, lured in some pigs, and they love it. Day 23, I decided to build a bridge from my side of the river over to the birch forest. So I spent the day terraforming the area and getting these structural supports in place. The next day I started construction on the bridge using extinguished campfires for this rural log bridge style. It took me a lot longer than I was expecting, but the bridge was finally done. The next day, I decided to head out in search of a swamp so that I could kill some slimes, as I wanted to add these support ropes to my bridge like the reference image. It didn't take long to find a swamp, so I just waited until nighttime for all the slimes to spawn. However, no slimes spawned. The next day, I built this stupid contraption that I thought would make slimes spawn, but it didn't work. Then I realized I could just use the world seed to find out where the slime chunks are. So I just left the swamp empty-handed to hunt down slimes a little closer to home. I arose on the 28th day to discover that there was a slime chunk right next to my house. And so I spent that day digging out a huge area where slimes could spawn. The next day I waited eagerly to see if a slime would actually spawn, and nothing. Yep, still no slime. Until finally, the smallest little slime sprung forth and I killed him. But he didn't just give me a slime ball, he gave me hope. On day 30, I automated the slime farm with this campfire contraption, and I enlisted the help of an iron golem to lure the slimes to their death. There are hoppers beneath the campfires that should collect any slime balls, so now I don't have to kill them myself. Day 31 was like Christmas because I went down to check on my slime farm and there was some slime balls waiting for me, which meant I could finally finish my bridge. I decided to use some of my homebred pigs to hold one end of the rope, and it was a horrible, terrible mistake. This bridge looks so silly, oh my gosh, but I decided to finish it anyway, and this is what it looked like by the end of the day. So I went to sleep, truly defeated. But on day 32, I had a plan. I covered up those pesky pigs so you couldn't see them anymore, and I marched myself off to the flower forest, and I picked flowers until the sun came down. Literally. And I finally made it back home safely, only to discover that there was a creeper in my bedroom. So I narrowly avoided that catastrophe and moved on to day 33, which I spent planting flowers on the other side of the river in an attempt to distract the eye from my weird bridge. Day 34, I woke up and I looked at my advancements and I thought, I haven't done anything. The Nether exists and I haven't been there. I spent the whole day mining obsidian and I built my Nether portal across the bridge. I made my first ever diamond sword, I enchanted it, and I hopped into the portal. And where I popped out is quite possibly the worst Nether spawn I have ever seen. When I finally made it down to the ground, I had a little wander around and I decided that I hated it. The only good thing about the Nether was these shroom lights, which are really cute. Then I found myself just drawn to this ugly biome in the distance and I had to get over there. When I got there, I didn't know what any of the blocks were, so I started breaking them to see what they were called, and I'm so embarrassed by what followed. When I went to retrieve my things, I realized the only things missing was my diamond sword and my shroom lights. Several ghasts spawned and made it very clear they didn't want me there anymore, so I just left. Didn't like it in there anyway. On day 36, I cleared out a piece of land near my hilltop farm. Then I spent day 37 fiddling around trying to build this moon out of birch planks. And on day 38, I built a barn around the moon. I call it the moon barn. On day 39, I finished the outside of the barn. On day 40, I opened up the barn and created some paddocks on either side. The next day, I wanted to make it more realistic, so I replaced all the grass inside the barn with mud and dirt. And I went and tamed some cows. They were extra annoying because they hated the bridge even more than I did and they refused to walk across it. But I eventually got them settled in the barn. On day 42, I filled the other side of the barn with sheep and I started dyeing them rainbow colours. So on day 43, I woke up and realised I had no iron, no diamonds, no coal left. So I went down into the caves and I found myself a stack of iron. But that wasn't enough, so on day 44, I went back underground, strip mining this time, until I broke into a ravine where I found these 2 diamonds. On day 45, I needed a break from the caves, so I crafted some cute little lanterns to decorate with, and I started working on the paths between all my buildings. It took me another day to finish them, but I was really happy with how they turned out. On day 47, I did something a bit different on the other side of the river. I made a leafy path instead, and when that was done, I realized there was an ugly cliff behind the nether portal, so I put a cute little waterfall there instead, and lit it up with a lantern. Day 48, I checked my slime farm, and there were 27 slime balls waiting for me. When I got home, I realized I didn't even have anywhere to put them, my chests were all so messy, so I started organizing. And on day 49, I continued organizing, until my house was finally tidy. Finally, the halfway point, day 50 had arrived. I stepped out my door and there was a creeper. I killed the creeper, but I felt weak. This busted iron sword needs an upgrade. But to get a powerful sword, I need a powerful enchanting area, which means more bookshelves. So I set out on a mission for sugarcane and leather so I could make enough bookshelves to get level 30 enchantments. I found quite a lot of sugarcane and then I accidentally stumbled across a village really close to my house. They seemed to worship some kind of demon because this giant portal had spawned right beside them. So I stole their books and I got out of there as quick as I could. By the time I got home, it was dark, but I decided to build my bookshelf anyway. Turns out that was a terrible idea, and when I woke up in the morning, I realized it looked hideous. I spent the entirety of day 51 rearranging the bookshelf, and then I finally enchanted my diamond sword with looting. How disappointing. Day 52. After my lackluster enchanting experience, I decided to try a different method. Villagers. If I can get some librarian villagers to come and live with me, I can get their book trades anytime I want. So I went to the nearest village and I kidnapped myself a villager. I heard the best way to travel with villagers is to put them in a boat. However, it was very slow. It started to get dark and I'd barely even left the village. So on day 53, I had a new plan. I would build a canal from the village to my house, and I can transport things back and forth super quickly. So construction on the canal began. It continued for another day. Then canal construction hit a bit of a roadblock in the form of a cliff. I either had to go around, through it, or over it. And I decided to take the wacky route and go over, which meant building a bubble elevator up to the top of the cliff and then continuing the canal over the treetops. By the end of day 56, I had reached my house, and I dropped off my first passenger of the canal boat. On day 57, I went to get a second villager, which is easy because the canal went straight to the village. However, I had a little trouble at the border, and this iron golem didn't want to let me in. Eventually, I snuck past him and selected a suitable villager to kidnap, but someone must have tipped off the authorities because when I got back to the canal, I met some resistance. In order to escape, I had to tie up the security guard and make a break for it. And finally, I now had 2 villagers. All I had to do was safely contain them, and it's all gone horribly wrong. They've escaped. It was getting kind of dark, so I ran around trying to get the situation under control, but these villagers just kept giving me the slip. The next morning, I managed to trap one of the villagers in a boat. I went looking for the second villager, and I found that he had become a fisherman somehow. What happened to him? Eventually, I got both villagers safely contained in the house. I installed some baby gates on the stairs. I put down some extra beds. On day 59, I went over to my farm area and built a little villager hut. This is where I wanted to put a farmer villager, but since it was so far away from my house, it was quite the struggle getting him there. He kept getting distracted and turning into a fisherman along the way somehow. But I eventually built a monorail system, and I transported him successfully to his new home and locked in his trade. On day 60, I built another little villager hut, this time on the hill behind my house. I spent day 61 getting the villager over to the new hut, and I turned him into a librarian. He had a silk touch trade, but it was really expensive because I guess villagers just hate me now. The next day, I decorated his cabin to cheer him up a little bit, and then I built 2 more cabins nearby. I decorated them nicely with a cute little chimney and some flowers, and then I went to go kidnap another villager. When I arrived at the village, it seemed like they were having some kind of town meeting, probably on account of all the abductions they've been experiencing lately. So I snatched one of them up while nobody was looking, and I took him back home. I ran into some issues with the canal along the way, but by day 64 I had 2 new villagers. The following day I got them into their cabins, but this guy refused to do any work. I had to throw bread at him until he turned into a librarian. Then after a while I managed to get this Fortune 3 trade, and on the other villager I managed to get an Efficiency 5 trade. However, I didn't have any emeralds or books to lock these trades in, and judging by the prices they were charging, they really hated me now. So day 66, I got busy farming and harvesting all my crops so I could trade with my farmer villager. He was going to give me all the emeralds I needed to lock in those librarian trades. I managed to gather a pretty respectable 22 emeralds, so I took my book and my emeralds back to my librarians, and oh my god, their trades had reset. What? I didn't know that happened. Why didn't anybody tell me this? So then I had to keep resetting his trade until I found something good, and I actually got something better. Mending. But it would cost me 30 emeralds, which I didn't have. So of course I ran around in a panic for a few minutes before I came up with a better plan. I took every single bone and turned it into bone meal. And I just about had 30 emeralds before it got dark, so I went and locked in my mending trade, boarded up his hut so nothing bad happened, and went to bed. So on day 68, while I waited for the crops to grow back, I got working on some chores around the land. I removed the ugly monorail system that I was using to transport villagers around. This creeper came along and wanted to help, but I was like, no thank you. Then I noticed that my floating canal system was actually really ugly, so I thought I would build some structural supports to make it make sense. At the end of the day, it looked like this, but that wasn't good enough, so on day 69, I added some overgrown leaves and vines to make it blend in more with nature, and now it's practical and pretty. On day 70, I extended this path over to the librarian villagers, and I realized it was a little bit dark around my house. So on day 71, I made a load of these lanterns and hung them from all the trees. I planted a little blue flower field, and now this place looks magical. I decided to sleep out under the stars that night, which ended in disaster. I'd still like to be able to sleep out here by the lake, so I decided to make a beach area. I dug out all of the dirt, and then I realized I didn't have any sand. So I ran off into the sunset in search of a desert. Rather predictably, it got dark, and I had to sleep in the middle of nowhere. The next morning, I discovered that I'd been sleeping right next to a desert. I grabbed myself some cactus, a couple of stacks of sand, and I went to explore. Oh no, that's a pillager tower. I think I'll go around that. Wait a second, is that a desert temple I see? Why, yes it is. So I went down into the desert temple, carefully mining my way down, and you'll never guess what happened next. There was nothing there. I felt so cheated, and I left that desert temple, enraged, never to return. By the time I made it back home, I had just enough time to cover the beach in sand, so I spent the following day decorating the beach with these sunbeds and a tiki bar made of extinguished campfires. And I spent a lovely night asleep on the beach. On day 75, I created a little sandy path down to the beach, and I did a bit of villager trading, so I ended the day with 11 emeralds. On day 76, I spent the entire day refreshing the trades on this villager to get some good ones. Maybe efficiency or fortune. But what's this? Silk touch for 8 diamonds? It was such a bargain I couldn't resist. So I locked in his silk touch trade and I moved on to the next villager. The next day I finally got an efficiency 5 trade, but it would cost 64 emeralds. But I didn't care. I was desperate. So I locked in that extortionate trade too. Then that evening I made an anvil and I created my super pickaxe. I wanted to see how fast this baby could break rock and how many diamonds I could get in one day. The answer was 0. Yes, I didn't get a single diamond. However, the next day I broke into a cave and there were 6 diamonds sitting right there. So I took them, obviously. And then for some reason I attacked an enderman. And he killed me, spewing my items all over a random cave in the middle of nowhere. It was great. I woke up the next morning and went to retrieve my items from the distant cave, and when I got there I realized the reason I died was probably because I was just wearing the remnants of my iron armor that I made like 50 days ago. So now I was more determined than ever to find lots of diamonds, make myself a full set of diamond armor, and never die again. I set out strip mining for diamonds, and guess what? I didn't find a single one again. Then the following day I broke into a mine shaft and explored that. However, not a single diamond. Then things started to get a little hairy in there, and I lost my nerve. So I came back up to the surface, went back home, put away all my things, and wondered what I was doing with my life. Will I ever defeat the Ender Dragon? Probably not. But you know what I can do? Get some turtles. So on day 81, I applied my Silk Touch book to my pickaxe, and I went out in search of turtles. Found some turts hanging out on the beach. Once they had laid their beautiful eggs for me, I snatched them up and I took them home to hatch them. It was dark when I arrived home, but that's actually perfect turtle hatching time, so I laid them down on the beach, gave them some protection, and I did some night farming while I waited for them to hatch. Morning came and nothing had happened, not even a crack. So I made my turtle egg hatchery a little more aesthetic, and I left them alone. Then I had an idea for a new project, so I crafted loads of coloured glass, and I grabbed all my spare lanterns. I started to build some floating lights above the river, and I thought they looked really cute, so the next day I added more. And even though these look absolutely magical, in real life they're actually quite bad for the environment because they can cause pollution and fires, so from now on I shall only enjoy these within the game of Minecraft. I thought these looked absolutely stunning, especially in the dark. On day 84, I got a bit of a craving to make some of those soul campfires and soul torches, but I was out of soul sand, so I would have to make a trip back to the Nether. I know I said I would never go back there, but I did. When I arrived, there was a ghast camping the Nether portal, so I killed him and ran off to find some soul sand. I got a little bit distracted by some shiny gold and I started mining away, but apparently this pig guy didn't like that and he started attacking me. I felt bad for stealing his gold, so I turned it into ingots and I traded with him. He was quite lovely actually. I was so happy with my new friend that I just hopped right back in the Nether portal. As I did so, a ghast launched a fireball at me. On the other side of the portal, I realized I didn't get the soul sand that I went for, and I was pretty certain that there was a fireball waiting for me when I returned to the Nether. And yep, luckily I brought my flint and steel so I could relight the portal. I went and harvested a few souls, and I was back in the overworld in no time. On day 85, I made myself a soul campfire, and I placed it in the blue flower field. And then inspiration struck. I had all this soul sand, so I made a hot tub in my back garden. I decorated it with these soul lanterns, and then I put loads of flower pots around and filled them with anything I could find. And I won't lie to you, it wasn't the most relaxing hot tub I've ever been in. It was a bit turbulent, but at least it looks nice. Day 86, turtle check. Nope, still not hatched. These turtles were supposed to be my pride and glory. So in an attempt to find some other way to impress you guys, I thought I would take on the Ender Dragon. But first, I would need to prepare myself. I knew I wouldn't have time to mine up all the resources myself, so I planned to steal them from elsewhere. I ran away from home, looking for desert temples, and eventually I found one. It didn't really have anything good, just a projectile protection 3, so I took that and ran off to find another temple. I found one, but it was getting dark, so I took a little power nap. In the morning, I went down into the temple, and I managed to get a few diamonds and some more enchanted books. Then I found a third temple. This one had some saddles and a golden apple. By then, I was pretty fed up of desert temples, and I wanted to go home. I took a little nap in the middle of nowhere, and then on day 88, I finally tamed a horse now that I had a saddle and some horse armor. This made my journey home a little quicker, and I arrived just before nightfall. Somehow, I accidentally rode my horse into the campfire and nearly killed him though. To commemorate my happy horse day, I made a sign for the wall that says "Live, Laugh, Horse." At the start of day 89, Joel came into my room and asked me what I was doing. I told him I was planning on going to the end, and he enlightened me that I would in fact need some blaze rods to do that. Oh, what a fool I had been. I thought I would never go back to the nether, but here I am. On day 90, I finally found a nether fortress, and I officially unlocked my achievement. On day 91, I saw a blaze spawner in the distance, and I went in for the kill. But there were far too many blaze there, so I turned right back around and I ran away. I tried to run home, but then I realized my path back to the portal was blocked by magma cubes. So I spent the rest of the day tunneling towards the blaze spawner instead. Eventually I was below the spawner, so I popped out and collected my first blaze rod. Day 92, I was playing a dangerous game of whack-a-mole with these blazes, and I was the mole. But by the end of the day, I'd collected 8 blaze rods, and apparently that was all I needed. With that, I left the nether, knowing I would probably never return. That night, I didn't sleep, because I had to hunt down some ender pearls. In all my 92 days of living, I had only collected 2 thus far. So I found a nice open plains biome, and I attracted the attention of this tall gentleman. And then I panicked a little bit, ran around a tree a few times, and he killed me. I returned to the scene of the crime to collect my belongings and have my revenge. Luckily, he gave me 2 ender pearls for my troubles, because he was the only enderman I saw that entire night. On day 93, I made some Eye of Enders, and I went to locate the stronghold. I took my horse with me so we could ride like the wind, and I found it about 1,000 blocks away from my house. I put my horse in a hole, and I mined down to break into the stronghold. It didn't take me long to find it, but when I did, I realized it had 0 Eye of Enders in it. Right about then, I was thinking that I'm the most unlucky Minecraft player to ever exist. I would need 12 Eye of Enders, and I only had 4. So I went back up to the surface, where rather poetically it was raining, and I stood in the rain wondering what I should do. I only had a few days left to defeat the Ender Dragon, and I couldn't even get into the end. So I ran home in the rain as fast as my little horse's legs would take me. And then disaster struck. We fell into a deep ravine. There was no way to get him out, so I just had to leave him there to die. My mission was too important. I had to kill the Ender Dragon before day 100, otherwise I would lose my license to Minecraft. So, when it got dark, I killed Endermen. I had a new method this time that was much more effective. I trapped them in boats, so they couldn't attack me. By night, I would hunt them on the plains. By day, I would hunt them in the mines. I even found a couple of diamonds while I was down there too. And finally, on day 95, I had all the ender pearls I needed. So I went home and started making my final preparations. I upgraded some of my iron armor to diamond, and now I just needed to enchant it. So I did everything I could to get my level as high as possible, killing cows, trading with villagers, and hunting mobs, until finally I had some pretty good enchantments, lots of protection, and most importantly, feather falling on my boots. So on day 97, I was ready. I packed my bags, I carved a pumpkin just in case, and I went back to the end portal. I jumped in knowing this was my one and only chance to kill the Ender Dragon. When I arrived, I got to work. I knew I had to destroy those beacon thingies, so that's what I started doing. I definitely wasn't doing it right though, because I kept getting knocked off my pillars, and if I didn't have feather falling on my boots, I would be dead. This took me forever. I even had to stop halfway through the fight and Google how to kill the Ender Dragon, because when he landed in the middle like this, I didn't know how to kill him. However, I did learn the hard way not to go near his face. but I learned apparently you have to hit the butt, so that's what I did. However, at this point in the fight, I kept accidentally looking the wrong way at some Endermen, and I had a few close calls. But I didn't come all this way to be killed by an Enderman, so I engaged the emergency pumpkin, and I slayed the Ender Dragon. By now, it was already day 98 and my 100-day deadline was drawing ever closer. But instead of going back through the portal, I decided to look for an end city, because I had one last little plan. So I popped into this portal thing, and I popped back out again in possibly the worst place ever. What? Why am I the unluckiest Minecraft player to ever exist? I thought I could just ender pearl over to the nearest island, but that didn't work. So I bridged across, and luckily there was an end city nearby, so I just went straight for the ship, took my elytra, harvested my dragon head, and it fell on the ground. So in a panic, I decided to try and fly down there and retrieve it. And surprisingly, I didn't die. Now all I had to do was get back to the end portal, and I had completed Minecraft. I emerged from the stronghold on day 100, and ran all day to get home. When I arrived, I had one final plan. I dyed all my rainbow sheep black so that I could build this dead ender dragon outside my front door. By the time I finished, it was the middle of the night, so I slept in my bunk bed for the final time at the end of day 100.